Good evening and welcome to a new episode of Sudan in a Week. The conflict in Sudan has evolved far beyond the localized struggle for power. It has become a defining test of African sovereignty in the 21st century. As the nation faces an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe and the systemic erosion of its state's institutions, a fierce debate has ignited over who has the right to chart the path toward peace. For many, the international community's approach, characterized by high-level summits in European capitals, is increasingly seen not as a solution, but as an external imposition that risks sidelining the will of the Sudanese people. In this climate of geopolitical tension, a new diplomatic front is emerging. It is a movement that seeks to pivot away from traditional Western-led mediation, questioning the motives of foreign intelligence services and rejecting any dialogue that treats sovereign state forces and paramilitary militias as equals. This sovereign path emphasizes that true peace cannot be imported. It must be built through a Sudanese dialogue that prioritizes justice, national integrity, and the total rejection of terrorism. To understand the strategic shift behind this movement and the rise of new alliances from Kuala Lumpur to the heart of Khartoum, we are joined by a man who has become a leading architect of this vision. He is a veteran of peace processes, a staunch defender for national autonomy, and a primary voice for the Democratic Bloc's strategic future. Please welcome the Sudanese spokesperson of the Democratic Bloc, Secretary of Information, official spokesperson of the Justice and Equality Movement, and rapporteur of the Revolutionary Front, Dr. Mohamed Zakarea Fargallah. Dr. Mohamed, welcome to Sudan in a Week.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and I'm very happy to be your guest for this afternoon, and I hope this interview will benefit all the public and it will achieve its goals. I'm happy again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohamed, and it is a pleasure to have you as our guest as well. Dr. Mohamed, I would like to start with you with the Berlin Conference rejection. Before the Berlin Humanitarian Conference ever began, we saw clear rejection from the Sudanese government and much of the political spectrum. Some describe it as a matter of sovereignty. Others question the structure of the conference itself. How do you read this reaction?
Again, thank you. First, let me start by giving a brief idea, an introduction about the political and civil society, the reality of the political forces in Sudan after the eruption of the war in April 2023. These forces divided into two groups. First, and the majority sided Sudan government and supporting Sudan Army Force, SAF, and some of them as well sided RSF, and as well they are supporting, not dealing in any way with the Sudan government. So this is the main criteria for the political forces in Sudan. That is why we as Democratic Bloc always call for equal representation. That is come to the point that why we reject Berlin Conference. The organizers did not follow this criteria as a measure to decide, to choose who will be represented in this conference and who will be excluded. They invited 41 participants, and 34 out of these 41 are siding RSF, Rapid Support Forces, and this is injustice. That is why we call for equal representation. This is the first reason behind the rejection. The second, they did not consult even the Sudanese entities regarding the organization, how such kind of humanitarian conference can achieve its goal. We as DP, we don't oppose any international effort in order to ease the pressure on our people, or in order to end the suffer of Sudanese people. But we call for every single effort has to be coordinated, consulted with the Sudanese, as our demand always is that it is a Sudanese dialogue. When they organize this conference, they did not consult us about the agenda. They did not consult us about the parties who will participate in this conference. The third reason behind the rejection of this conference as well, they excluded Sudan government. It is surprisingly, astonishingly, that conference will discuss the issue of the humanitarian aids, but they are not going to consult Sudan government how they can implement the outcome and recommendations of this conference. This is a big question. That is why we call, if any issue related to Sudan government has to be there. This is the main three behind the rejection of this effort, but as well, I can emphasize that we support any effort, but that effort has to align with the goals, with the interests of Sudanese themselves.
So I assume, Dr. Mohammed, that you think it was more political than procedural. But could engagement have been a better option, in your opinion?
Of course, we always call international community. There is something called quantity. The quantities forms of African Union, Arab League, and as well EU, European Union, and United Nations, and IGAD. These five entities or organizations formed the quantity. They are in coordination with what so-called the Quad, and as well they coordinated with German and France and the UK to organize this conference, but they lack their first challenge or mistake. They lack coordination with the Sudanese stakeholders themselves. They just consult some forces that align or siding RSF. They ignored totally those who are representing the majority of Sudanese, those who are now in Khartoum, where I am now, those who are expressing the reality of Sudanese and their suffer as well. This is the main shortage. And as well, in addition to this, it is a humanitarian conference, but they mixed the agenda. They pushed the political issue among this agenda that is caused somehow kind of chaos, as we call as DP, as a democratic bloc, in our vision that it has to be separation, complete separation between the humanitarian issue and the political issue. If the organizers returned back and coordinate with Sudan government, and they came back as well to the indigenous, or say the real Sudanese forces, yes, we are happy to engage. We are happy to cooperate, so we can defend as well Sudanese interests.
Dr. Mohammed, since we are talking about boycotting the Berlin Conference, at the same time, the decision to boycott a conference that was presented as a humanitarian raised a lot of questions, especially for those who see any international platform as an opportunity to support civilians. What led to this decision, in your view? And do you think it was more about principle than immediate outcomes?
Of course, it's more about principle more than the outcomes, because if you start in a wrong way, that means you're going to end up with very wrong recommendations or outcome. But let me go back. This is not the first conference that related to the humanitarian issue in Sudan. Two conferences already being held. The first was in April 2023 in Paris, and the second was in April 2024, 2024 and 2025 was in London. Mm-hmm. The outcome of these two conferences was like a big failure, as For the one that being held in Paris, the donors committed or donated 2.1 million. That amount of money, the actual amount being received or paid actually is less than 10% of this total amount.
Do you think that
The
the
real
message
question,
was clearly understood internationally of boycotting this conference? Was your message
that is,
understood?
yes, that is clear. As we wrote a statement, we detailed and elaborated our position and the reasons why we are boycotting this. And we as well criticize the procedural issues that related to the organization of this conference. And we as well provided some recommendation because we always look for the future. We are supporting any effort that will help to ease the pressure and suffer of our people. We are not against these initiatives, but as well we want to this initiative to be in the interest of Sudanese themselves. We are refusing to politicize the humanitarian aid or to use the humanitarian aid as a tool in order to oppose the sovereignty of the country itself. And what we can say from the mistakes that committed by the organizers, this conference is not in the perfect way. We call the UK and German and France, and as well from behind them the Quad and the Quantity
Dr.
for the
Mohammed,
next.
so in your opinion, you told us that the message was clearly understood internationally, but let's be honest. There is also another side to this. Some argue that refusing participation might limit access to urgent international aid, particularly in a crisis like Sudan's. How do you respond to that concern?
Let me be frank regarding this and differentiate between the two things. First, to be there in the conference hall and to deal with the outcome of this conference. If any donation came to Sudan government or to Sudanese people, of course, this donation is more than welcome. This is something like clear, and this is our public position. But to be part of this conference, it is quite difficult for us, even for the next one that planned to be held in April 2027, if the organizers repeated the same mistakes. So for the public, we can like emphasize that, yes, we accept any donation, unless this donation is not conditioned, unless this donation is like directed to support fighting group like RSF. If this donation is coming to Sudanese people, of course, it's more than welcome.
So, do you think that there's a real risk here on civilians, or do you believe that the impact is being overstated?
Of course, civilians always are there and affected, but one of the biggest challenge that always international community and as well international actors like try to not address in a proper way is the supply of the militia, RSF, Rapid Support Forces with the weapons, and they use the humanitarian convoys as a cover to allow supply of these military assets to their area. So this is one of the biggest challenge. We call for the organizers for the latest conference and for the organizers of the previous conference as well to direct the efforts to stop the supply of the weapons and military assets to the RSF and RSF related movement. But they are like not responding to this request, and this always make our people more suffer from the killing, from the atrocities that are committed by the RSF, and so on.
So that's interesting, but everything you have mentioned brings us to a key question. If this path is rejected, then what is the alternative? What kind of approach would you actually address the humanitarian situation effectively?
Let me say something first. When in the Sudan, in reality, most of the people, most of the citizens flee the area where RSF is to the area where SAF is. Okay, that's security, because human always tend to be in a safe place, and this is can stand as a proof that RSF commit atrocities against civilians themselves. Let me say something else as well. That Sudan government, in its known and public position, they are allowing all the humanitarian aids to pass through the ports. For example, from Dungula towards Darfur. Dungula is a city in North Sudan. The passing of the convoys of humanitarian aid is allowed towards northern Darfur, and as well from Al Ubaid, which is in Kordofan, center of Sudan, kind of, or western of Sudan, and from Adari, even Adari leading to the area where RSF mostly control the Darfur region. But Sudan government issued an official statement to just declare that it is like agree, or Sudan government agree to the passing of the humanitarian aid through this port to the area of the control of RSF. This all stand as evidence that Sudan government and Sudanese as well political and civil forces trying and doing their best to ease the suffer of the people. On the other hand, the RSF rejected the truths that provided or suggested by the General Secretary of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, that was like 6 months ago, and they as well attacked the civilian in the displaced people, internally displaced people, like a camp of Zamzam, western or southern of Al Fashir, the capital of Darfur. They killed the people in Al Fashir. Anyway, Sudan government and Sudanese political forces are more than open to allow the passage of the humanitarian aid to those in need.
Dr. Mohammed, if we want to talk about Kuala Lumpur meetings, I mean, let's shift now to Kuala Lumpur Coalition. Many people are hearing about it, but not everyone understands its structure or objectives. Could you please give us a clear overview of how this coalition is organized and what it aims to achieve?
To understand the coalition of Kuala Lumpur, it has to be presented on the background of the political scene, Sudanese political scene itself. There is a group of political forces that of Islamic background. They've been invited by one of the facilitators. It calls Pro-Mediation Organization. It is a French organization. I think the finance provided by the EU.
So it is more than just a political alliance, in your opinion?
It is more than just a political alliance, of course. It is a real group of political and social and civil entities. They addressed the Sudan issue as well. They ended up with a clear vision how to put an end to this conflict. One of the biggest questions that the Sudanese elite through the history of Sudan failed to answer is how we can move from a transitional period to a democratic period.
Would you describe it as an alternative platform, Dr. Mohammed? Would you describe it as an alternative platform?
It is an original and a basic platform. It is not the only one platform, but it is one of the most important platforms, because some political forces that siding RSF, they always excluding the Islamic background entities. Yeah. And this is caused chaos because we call as a principle for inclusivity. We call for not to exclude any party. Once you are Sudanese party. Once you are Sudanese organization, you have to be part of this Sudanese national or say, inclusive dialogue.
At the
But
same time,
some of
Dr. Muhammad, excuse me for interrupting you, but at the same time, we're seeing different political forces positioning themselves as alternatives on the scene. In this context, where does the Kuala Lumpur coalition stand, and how likely is it to gain international recognition?
You can distinguish or differentiate the political groups in Sudan to say 3 or 4. DP plus, Democratic Bloc plus, this is a national Sudanese forces of no ideology, and the Kuala Lumpur Forum or platform, and they are of Islamic background, and Sumut plus Sumut that include as well those who are siding RSF, those like Communist Party, Bas Party, and so on. This is the main entities or groups in Sudan, actually. But in our vision as a DB, in order to achieve a lasting solution and peace, we have to sit all together, Kuala Lumpur Forum and DP Plus Forum and Sumut Plus Forum to discuss in a Sudanese dialogue, inclusive one, without exclusion, unless if somebody committed crime against humanity or committed crimes, war crimes, or something like that. But apart from this, we can't exclude anybody because of its political or ideology vision. That is something against the principles and the value of democracy itself.
Of course, there's no political initiative comes without controversy. There have been various accusations and narratives circulating around some actors involved in mediation efforts. How do you assess these claims, and how much do they actually matter?
We've been received many initiatives from international actors and as well internally. This initiative sometimes submitted by say Kuala Lumpur, by say DP Plus, and so on. But the solution for all these diverse and all these differences is to sit all together. DP Vision always to respond to any initiative that provided internally or externally, but it has as well to be conditioned according to the principle of democracy, sovereignty of Sudan, and as well unity of Sudan, and as well inclusivity.
Since we are talking about external influence, Dr. Muhammad, this also raises a broader concern. Many African initiatives in the past have faced challenges related to external influence. How can participants in Kuala Lumpur ensure that this effort remains independent and focused on Sudan's interests only?
In the 2021 century, you can't like exclude completely the effort of the international actors. But what you can do, according to DP Vision, that to try to make this effort align with the interests of Sudanese entities themselves, to meet the interests of the Sudanese themselves. We are not against the international community, but we call for the international community not to control the process. They can be facilitators, they can be like supporters, even like providing a technical support, but they can't be like controlling the whole process. Yes, African Union invited us as a DP many times. We met in the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. That was July 2024, and again in July 2025, and again in January 2026. But all these meetings, we have the same vision that we should limit the intervention of the international community in the Sudanese issue. It has to be a Sudanese track. Then the second request that we always put on the table of the international actors, that these initiatives has to be harmonized, has to be coordinated, because these differences between the international actors themselves like contributed negatively to the Sudanese conflict itself. And the third request we always send to the Sudanese entities themselves, that we should sit together to each of us and to discuss these matters and these issues in Sudan, if that is possible, if not possible, in a place that we can agree upon.
Dr.
Our visions are
Dr. Mohammed, so we are talking about what we should do in the future, if this is correct to say. Let's talk about the future after 3 years, briefly, looking ahead to the next few years. Any political solution will likely require broad participation. In your view, is a fully inclusive process, bringing in all stakeholders, realistic, or are there any limits to that inclusivity?
Inclusivity has to be one of the principles that guide the political process itself. Because one of the main reasons behind the failure of the transitional period after December revolution of 2019, that's exclusion that imposed by some of parties of some parts of FFC, Forces for Freedom and Change. Exactly, it calls Central Council. Exactly, these parties try to exclude some other movements, especially the movement who signed Juba Peace Agreement, as well try to exclude the parties that of Islamic background and some other parties that joined the period of the previous regime, and we disagree about this completely. As we call that, all of us, all these parties has to be part of the process.
This
For the
brings
future,
us,
we
Dr.
see.
Muhammad, this brings us to the idea of transitional justice, which many see it as essential after conflict. In the Sudanese context, what would that actually look like in practice?
Of course, we call for accountability, we call for justice, of course, and there is no lasting peace without accountability. Those who committed crimes against Sudanese people has to be questions for their crimes, of course, and we do not differentiate. This is like a value. This is a principle that should apply to everyone, whether it is an organization, whether it is a movement, whether it is a party, whether it is an individual.
So are we
And
talking
let me
about
say as well,
trials? We're talking about trials, truth commissions, or something else?
we're talking, of course, about trials, and we're talking in the same time about truth commissions because we know we need to mix the two systems. Without trials, there will be no amnesty. There will be no recovery. I'm talking about the psychological and social recovery.
So the society or our society is not ready for that process, right?
The society, Sudanese society faces difficulties and challenges because of the spread of the speech of hate. This is one of the reasons, and as well, even this war, it has say aspect of ethnicity, as most of the supporters of RSF, they are from say specific geographical area, a specific background, but even we call this a very complicated situation, but as well we call to say to each other. Those who are known committed crimes has to be sentenced. Those who support it indirectly, then this is where the truth and should come.
I would like to sincerely thank you, Dr. Mohamed Zakarea Fargallah, for joining us today and for sharing your valuable insights throughout this discussion.
Thank you very much, and I hope all success to you and to your channel.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mohamed.
Cheers.
As we look ahead, it's clear that the future of Sudan will depend not only on ending the current conflict, but on building a political path that balances inclusion, accountability, and long-term stability. Today's conversation has shown just how complex these challenges are, from international dynamics to internal dialogue, and from immediate humanitarian concerns to the deeper need for justice and reconciliation. Thank you to our viewers for being with us. Until next time, thank you. Have a wonderful night.